Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighborhood watchmaker, Rob Nuds. Today, I am joined by two guests in the studio who barely need any introduction whatsoever. We have our returning guest, Mike France of Christopher Ward, and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Roger Smith of Roger W. Smith Watches. How are you, gentlemen? Welcome to the studio.
All very good, thank you.
Yeah, very well. Thanks, Rob. Thank you. Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Mike, this is your third appearance on the show now, isn't it? At least.
I think it might be, yeah.
Incredible. You're becoming a swingman host. Do you want to take the mic sometime and interview some other people for us? We'd appreciate it.
I think you might regret that.
Yeah, already feeling by the tone of that voice that I definitely would. Okay, so thanks for coming back again. Offer rescinded. The reason why we have you two together today, which may to people that aren't within Britain or aware of what's going on in British watchmaking seem like a odd pairing, is that you two are behind the foundation of the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers, which is a rapidly expanding group of brands and makers, I suppose, as well, that are producing interesting timepieces and really bringing the whole culture of British watchmaking to a level that it certainly hasn't been at for many, many years. So let's start maybe with Roger. Could you tell us a little bit about the motivations that went into the formation of the Alliance? And then we'll ask Mike to tell us what the goals are for the group.
I mean, I've been sort of quietly making watches for a number of years now, and feeling, gradually as the years have gone by, sort of feeling that a lot more was happening in British watchmaking that perhaps was being spoken about in the media and so on. And I remember bumping into Mike on several occasions at Salon QP. And we were talking about the trade, the current state of the trade. And, I remember on one occasion our conversation sort of went over to, towards what is happening or what we felt was happening in Britain, and that perhaps it wasn't really being represented by the media and the current horological bodies, British horological bodies. So I'd been thinking about it for a number of years, and I said to Mike, well, should we do something about it? Should we set up a body, an alliance or something to try and shine a light on this? And Mike said yes. So that was the start of it. Very easy conversation. Sort of thoughts have always been very aligned on this, and it just seemed like a very natural thing to do between us both. We both coming from very different worlds, but I think that's to our strength, and to the strength of the alliance and what we're trying to achieve today.
Most definitely. How exactly did you two meet?
I think it was through Salon QP, wasn't it, Mike?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Many years ago, I came to listen to you, I think, speak at one of the Salon QPs, and I possibly, I can't remember precisely, but I remember showing you, I proudly showed you Caliber SH21.
That's it.
Which we developed, and you were kind enough to say a few kind words about it. But it was always an easy conversation, I felt, despite, as Roger says, we come from very, very different sort of backgrounds, and our two businesses are in some ways poles apart, but actually there was always a synergy, wasn't there, between us, Roger? There was always an empathy
Yes.
and an easy understanding. And when the man, the myth, the legend that is Roger Smith says, "Why don't we do something?" You don't say no, do you? So it was a pretty easy it was a pretty easy decision to make. But it was just a shared view that, as Roger says, that there was a lot going on in British watch and clockmaking that wasn't really being best represented at that time by what we were looking at that particular last Salon QP. And that was the sort of the genesis of the idea, really.
Very nice. I remember meeting Roger at Salon QP once. I'm sure Roger doesn't remember it. It was 8 years ago, but it was very enjoyable for me. Anyway, I had a great time. Thanks, Roger. And
I remember it well.
Yeah, of course. I've actually got a great picture of us.
I've got that on my wall in the workshop.
Oh, jolly good. Yeah, of course. Gold frame, right in the middle. It's a highlight of your career, I'm sure.
He refers to it all the time, Rob. I mean, you can't shut him up about it. It was a big moment for Roger, as I recall, Roger, wasn't it?
I mean, it was just another day in the life for me, whatever. Like, only the finest watchmaker of his generation. Yeah, who cares? Who cares? I used to work for Swatch, by the way, so whatever,
Coaxial statement, so that's good.
Yeah, lovely symmetry there, Roger. Nice one. So a bit of self-aggrandizing apart, let me move back to the subject of the conversation. You both, of course, and your efforts to raise the tide of British watchmaking internationally and to capitalize on the wealth of diversity within the industry now that, despite, as you both mentioned, coming from different parts of it, having the same goal, I imagine, to get the profile of British watchmaking out there and to shine a light on the creativity and the activity that's taking place within the country. Mike, how successful do you feel that's been so far since you founded the Alliance? Do you think that media outlets are picking up on the vast experimentation that's happening right now in British watchmaking?
Well, I mean, this is probably a good example. I mean, 3 years ago, we wouldn't have been having this chat, about the British watch industry. And yes, I think, to varying degrees, I think since we started, which is only sort of 2 years or so, I think there has been a huge increase in interest in what's going on in British watch and clockmaking. And, to the point that I remember last October in New York at the Wind Up Fair, the Worn and Wound boys had a whole segment of the show devoted to the Brits are coming. And again, I think one of the things, Roger, we found when we sort of started this, we had no idea ourselves how many brands were around. We knew there were some very interesting people doing some really encouraging and interesting things. But firstly, we had no idea whether anybody would be as interested in promoting the sector as we were. And we really didn't know how big the sector was. So the fact that we're able to identify a sector was a big step forward. And I think, as Roger will tell you, the scale of it shocked us a little bit, Roger, didn't it?
It did. I mean, I think we were having sort of quite bets on the side, didn't we, as to how many people, may join us. And I think, was it almost 2025 when we, within the first couple of days?
Yeah,
as trade
I think
members.
that's right, yeah.
And we sort of thought, well, if we get 8, 9, 10 people on board, that'll be a huge success. And here we are with, I think, 87 trade members on board now, which is taken us all by surprise. Yeah. I think we've just had 2 trade members join last week. And this is incredibly exciting and kind of proof that this was needed, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we had this sense, as we've said, that there was a bit of a renaissance going on. There was a lot of smart people sort of doing interesting things, but the scale of it has shocked us and really pleasantly surprised us. And then the join, the numbers joining was then sort of added to by the enthusiasm that they were showing for the whole fact that there was a sector. And I think it's one of those occasions when all of us is smarter than any one of us, and there's been this incredible sort of sharing of ideas, sharing of knowledge, helping each other out. Within 2 years, we've gone from a situation where most of us were operating pretty much as islands, maybe with 1 or 2 contacts in the British watch sector. And now there's this huge network going on of people sort of interested in each other's brands, as I say, helping other brands out with whatever it is, advice all the way through to movements, etc. So there's, which is pretty unusual in any industry sector, I think. It's certainly unusual in the watch industry. I was talking to somebody last week in Switzerland, about this very subject, and they were saying how they wished that there was the same level of camaraderie and togetherness in the Swiss industry as suddenly has appeared in the British sector. Now, of course, the Swiss industry is a lot bigger, but from small acorns, etc. And it's been a heartwarming and stimulating time the last couple of years. It really has.
I can very much imagine. I mean, I hear a great deal of positive feedback from your current members about how convivial the relationship is between them, and it may amaze people, and I'm sure the Swiss brands are gobsmacked by this level of camaraderie because it's so competitive and it's such a, in many ways, saturated market. To have people sharing manufacturers, information that, hard-won information that takes a long time. It's one thing to start a brand, of course, but then to get it to a point where you have the quality manufacturers on board that are within whatever price point you prefer to operate, and contacts that you've had to cultivate over years, then to offer those to, I suppose one would say, a de facto competitor is a remarkable thing to have achieved. But the advantage of it, of course, is that it enables all of these brands, some of them massive and some of them extremely small, to operate as one unit, an intimidating unit internationally, actually, because we see the power of the group brands, the major groups like Swatch Group and LVMH and Richemont, and how they have this huge economy of scale on their side. They can parcel up press releases when they need to and send them to the major media outlets and guarantee coverage because they're paying most of them to provide coverage. Now, for the first time, a nation of watchmakers from all different strata have aligned and are able to move as one beast. It's very exciting for me as a watchmaker who trained in the country myself to see this kind of helping hand extended from brands that, you two are perfect examples. Christopher Ward doesn't need anybody's help. Roger Smith doesn't need anybody's help. You're known, and so much so winning awards regularly for your output. But to have that prescience of necessity of this kind of alliance is, heartwarming is the word, Mike. Very well said. And talking of heartwarming, just to touch on a very current issue, because this episode will go out soon after the announcements of the GPHG have run around the internet. We have to congratulate you on winning with the Bel Canto.
Thank you very much.
Stunning watch. Well, thank you very much for providing the whole industry with an example of how incredible horology can be made at a very affordable price point, 3,350 Swiss francs. It won the Petit Aiguille Prize at the recent GPHG Awards. How do you feel about that? What's the response to the Bel Canto in general?
Well, I mean, the response to the Bel Canto has been great from the moment we launched it. I think it's for me, it's the story of really the story of the Bel Canto is really the story of four young men, and our technical director Frank Stelzer, our designers Adrian Buchman and Will Brackfield, and our product manager in Switzerland, Jörg Bader Jr. I mean, these are the guys who, for close on 3 years, worked pretty tirelessly to perfect a Sonnerie Passage watch, and not making it not just beautiful, but, as you say, the accessible to as many people as possible, which is, after all, our mission in life. And so, for their work to be recognised in this way, I think is is great. And I was very proud of them before the award. I mean, I've got a slightly sort of mixed view about awards. Let's remember Rudyard Kipling here. But I must say, knowing as I do the amount of effort that these guys put in, I think it was a lovely way of their work being recognised. And I presume it won't do any harm for the sales either. And I believe we're the first British brand to ever win at GPHG, which was a nice touch. I know George has been honoured in the past by them, Roger, hasn't he? And but I don't think it was kind of in the same, it's George Daniels. That's a different level, isn't it? But as in any of the sort of specific categories, I think we're the first British brand that's ever won, and let's hope it's a sign of the floodgates opening, because I think many British brands will be winning in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. I believe, if memory serves, George won special jury prize in 2016, the George Daniels Educational Trust, which was a fantastic thing to get recognized on that stage. But during our GPHG results analysis show, which aired on the 14th of November, we discussed whether or not you might think that the fact that you won this award now has anything at all, because we know that these juries are quite politically motivated, with the fact that you now have a presence in Switzerland as well.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the politics of the Swiss watch industry. I do know that they exist. Who knows why? I was really disappointed that in the Challenger section, Studio Underdog didn't win. In my view, they should have done. But I'm sure Richard will be back in the future, as will others. And I don't think we can be ignored any longer. And I think that's whether we won because we've got a presence in Switzerland as well as being a British brand. I have no idea. What I do think is that they are beginning to recognise what's happening over here, and if British brands continue to create fantastic watches, then I think they're going to pick up an increasing number of prizes going forward, and I really hope that's the case. And maybe as I say, we're just the sort of the first one to break down the barrier.
I think when it comes down to it, really, the Bel Canto was undeniable in that category. It stands shoulder to shoulder with even the more expensive watches in that segment, like the Habering, for example, which is a beautiful watch from a respected maker. But when you think about what that category exists for, it just couldn't not have won. I think the Studio Underdog ran into some pretty stiff competition, despite easily being the most affordable and the most exciting aesthetically, I would say. I don't know if you care to speculate as to why you think it didn't win. Our feelings were it might be because it wasn't a particularly current model, because it was just a slight reskin of the original version, and that might have harmed it. But have you got any thoughts on that subject?
Not really. I have no idea how and why people vote for any watches. I mean, I know Roger's been a juror in the past, and it's a mystery to me. And as I say, I won't lose too much time over it. It's a nice thing to have happened to us, and but moving onwards and upwards, I say, and let's keep creating watches that we want to create and that people seem to like. And if you get an award, that's a bonus. But we don't do it for awards, and we do it for people who enjoy watches.
And that's the way it should be, absolutely. Roger, just to dig into the insight of an actual jury member who has voted in this contest before, what were your thought processes? Did you vote for the watches you felt deserved to win, or the watches you liked the most for a personal reason, or for some other reason?
Yeah, I mean, I was a jury member. I think I was 4 or 5 years, maybe 5, 6 years ago. I just did it for a year, and I mean, I went for the watches that I thought genuinely deserved to win an award. Something that watches which interested me as a watchmaker, watches that I felt were contributing to the industry, and I think that was my sort of main criteria, really.
It's very interesting. I think that's the angle I would try and take myself, and I would like to poll a few jury members and find out exactly what their motivations are behind the votes, because that would be interesting. But I'm sure it will always be a competition that has its surprises within it. Now, we talked about the rarity of independent brands coming together under a the banner of an alliance or working together on a project, especially in Switzerland. In Switzerland, I can only think off the top of my head of one example, certainly recent example, where 3 brands collaborated on the development of a movement, and that was Singer Reimagined, H. Moser and C, and Fabergé. They collaborated to bring to life a specific type of Agenor chronograph that they all felt they could use within their products, and they shared the research and development costs, which is quite rare. I think certainly more seldom in Switzerland than we hope it will be in Britain now, thanks to the alliance. And I can well imagine the kind of experience and contacts that both Roger Smith and Christopher Ward could offer to other brands. But how have both of your brands separately benefited from being part of the alliance? Have you also shared information or had information shared with you from other brands that have changed your processes or manufacturing ideas?
I think for us, I mean, we're sort of always on hand to help answer any questions from any trade members should they wish. We've had contacts from various people who are inquiring about machinery, ways to, CNC machinery. We bought our first piece in 2005, and so we've got a good knowledge of that level of equipment now, and we've managed to help a couple of people in their early stages of thought processes and so on. I think that's the thing with the alliance, and you hinted at before. We are here to help and share ideas, and for me, there's space for everyone. It's still a very small emerging market, and if we can help other people along the way, then so much the better. And the stronger that we can all be working together, for a common goal, really, to build on what's really exciting industry.
Go ahead, Mike. Give us your response to that one.
Well, I mean, similarly, really, I've been, deeply encouraged by I'm fascinated by the contacts that we've been able to make in the industry, and people approaching us, sometimes asking for some advice or whatever, which we're always happy to give, if indeed it's worth having, which sometimes it may be, sometimes maybe not. I think one of the more interesting things is it's given Christopher Ward a profile so that people who are even in manufacturing or potentially trying to get into the manufacture of componentry in the UK have approached us. I'm thinking of one individual in particular who has a deep desire to create commercially viable cases in the UK, and we have shared a lot of information with him, and we're hopeful that at some point in the future, he will be able to set up an operation that can produce high quality cases at reasonable prices. As Roger says, it's a fledgling industry really at the moment, fast growing, and the prime concern is not necessarily or the prime hope in the near term isn't to have a huge and burgeoning watch manufacturing sector, but wherever we can encourage that to happen, and there are bits of it knocking about all over the place now. We will look to encourage it, and I think the fact that the alliance has this profile has encouraged people to think about doing things like that, and that's one of the real benefits of the alliance and the profile that it has, is that there's something around which people can actually cluster now, and all sectors of all industries require a cluster mentality. Ultimately, if they're going to be successful, they need to feed off each other. And it's early days, but 2 years on, there are really interesting things going on in the sector.
I can very much imagine how rewarding it is when someone hoping to start something like that in Britain, something that would benefit so many of those manufacturers in so many ways, not just the whole British made angle, which is obviously very good from a storytelling perspective, but also the access, the communication, same language communication, the reduced shipping concerns that are now obviously even more complex than they were a couple of years ago with things coming into the country. But I guess that one of the strengths of the alliance is that you now have put out into the world a big marker point for other brands and aspiring brands to look at, to flock towards, like you say, to cluster around this idea and to have someone or many people to lean on when they're just taking steps in the early days. I assume, and this is an assumption, so forgive me if it's wrong, that you didn't know all of the brands that have approached you at the time of their initial approach. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the case. We've done a lot of research, and we trawled through the internet and tried to find as many companies as we could. But yes, I mean, there were companies that came out of the woodwork shortly after we launched. This is the interesting thing about what's going on in British watchmaking. We're getting lots of new companies, lots of new startup companies. Not all of them, sadly, will make it. But, at least we can be here now to help these people and to try and make sure that we have a greater success rate and, a common voice and ability to get the message across. So it's just come at the right time. And I think another interesting take of all this, certainly for me, is that the vast majority, in fact, probably 99% of these companies are people who've come from outside of a traditional watchmaking background. These are people who are wanting to create new businesses and are obviously attracted to the watchmaking side of things. But I think that's to our real advantage, actually.
No, I can see how that diversity of background is obviously very valuable for everybody. And I want to talk a little bit more about those brands, especially perhaps the ones that you didn't know about before they joined the Alliance. But you've given me the opportunity to segue into your background, because although you are very well known within the industry and I'm sure within our network, the crowd we have in our WhatsApp chat group, the Real-Time Network, which is the most dedicated listeners of the show, are desperate to hear your story from the horse's mouth. So you obviously come from a more traditional watchmaking background than many of these makers do. Would you be so kind as to give us a breakdown of where your career started, when you knew you wanted to be a watchmaker, and the process that is now legend that you went through to achieve your goal?
Oh gosh, how long do we have?
Well, actually, to be quite precise, you've got 27 minutes max, and I need to squeeze my outro into that, so don't ramble on too much. But
no, I won't.
Try and keep it around 10 or 12 minutes, and I'll go make a cup of tea.
Okay. Sorry, Mike. Yes, yes, you're right. I came from what I was classed as more traditional background. My father, he was a doctor actually, and he sort of pushed me in the direction of watchmaking. Why, I don't really know, other than the fact that he could see I was more practically orientated than academic. And I was one of these kids who just drifted through school, not really understanding why he was there. But anyway, thank goodness my father sort of pushed me in this direction. And I remember the first day of college in Manchester was the best day of education I ever had. And I couldn't believe that we were allowed to use lathes and drills and files and saws. And I was away. That was it for me. But the real turning point came when George Daniels visited the college one day. He donated a wheel cutting engine to the college, and he came to meet the students. And the day before he arrived, I didn't know who George Daniels was. Somebody said that he was a watchmaker who made watches by hand, but I didn't believe it. I thought, well, that's impossible, because for me, all wristwatches have always been an industrialized process. And, today the vast majority. That is still the case for the majority of watches being made today. So yeah, George arrived the day after, and all those preconceptions were blown away. He was a remarkable character, and he was as much the person as his skill as a watchmaker that sort of really captivated my imagination. And I think for me, it was this crazy idea that one man could design and make a complete watch from start to finish. As I said, it was just unheard of. And he was this guy who was making a very successful career out of it. And I thought, gosh, one day that's something I would like to do, basically. I was training to be a watch repairer at the time. I was working for, actually another trade member of the Alliance. We all know Neil Duckworth. He was my boss. He was the then importer of Tag Heuer watches into the UK. And I worked for him in his workshop as a repairer. That was going to be my future as a repairer of watches. But after the Daniels meeting, that's when things changed, and I decided I wanted to focus more on the making side of it. Am I waffling too much?
Honestly, you can't waffle enough. It's fascinating.
Are you sure? Carry on. Yeah. Okay, I'm just feel a bit. I'm monopolising a bit too much. Anyway, do tell me to shut up whenever. But so the making side, is something that was in the back of my mind from that first meeting with George. Then I finished college, went to work at Tag Heuer, and really I did enjoy it, but I wanted more. I wanted to make a watch, and I wrote to George and asked if he'd apprentice me, and he invited me over to the Isle of Man, where I am today, and he basically said at the end of the day, he said, look, if you want to make a watch, go away and do it yourself. He said, I can't teach you. It's something that you have to be 100% committed to. And, that was it. I mean, I was incredibly naive looking back. I remember going home and my father asking how it went. And I just regaled the story that, George told me to start. And so my father said, well, what are you going to do? So I said, well, I'm going to start. And that was it. Not much thought went into it, but then that was the start of, 7.5 years sort of quest to try and make a good wristwatch. Well, sorry, good pocket watch. And my father, he lent me some money to buy a lathe, a Chaublin lathe, which is an incredible lathe. We still have it here in the workshop. It's used regularly, and I set up a small workshop in a partitioned area of the garage that we had. I was still living at home with my parents, and I started making this pocket watch, and that one watch turned into two watches before George eventually said, well, congratulations, you're a watchmaker. And that was it for me. I was away then. And several months after that, George asked me if I'd move over here to the Isle of Man to work with him on the Millennium Project.
Incredible. What year was that you moved over to the Isle of Man?
So I was in 98. January the 2nd, 1998. It's ingrained in my... it's one of the only dates I ever remember, actually.
So it's been 25 years now on the Isle of Man. How is it to live there? Because I'm sure that most of our listeners have never been to the Isle of Man. I only went once for the TT,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Classic. That was interesting. But what is it like? Because beyond Douglas, it's quite a rural location, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually. It is an interesting place. I've just come back from Singapore and Hong Kong, and those two islands are a similar size to the Isle of Man. And the Isle of Man has a population of 85,000, whereas I think Singapore has a population of about 4.5, 5 million people. So that does give you a good idea as to the differences. Yes, it's very rural. It's a lovely place, actually. It's phenomenal. I mean, I've always sort of lived in rural areas, I was brought up in Bolton and on the outskirts of Bolton. And so I fitted in very well. And for me, the priority always has been and is watchmaking. And I think the Isle of Man's worked to my advantage because really I've been outside of the watchmaking world for this past 25 years. And I think that's been to my advantage because it teaches you to be self-reliant and creative. And I think basically, obviously there are no watchmaking influences other than George Daniels on the Isle of Man. And so that, I think, has been to my advantage.
Well, that's interesting to say because now, of course, you're part of this alliance, one of the founding members of it. You are maybe more exposed to different ideas and new influences more directly as a course of daily business than you ever would have been before, working away on the masterpieces you create on the Isle of Man. Of the brands that you have in the alliance, which ones maybe surprised you the most? That's not to say that any that you don't mention here aren't also wonderful companies, but which ones did you look at and think, wow, I would never think to do that or would never do it, but it really works for them? It could be something to do with the case design, for example, maybe materials or a use of color, or even maybe something more business oriented in terms of communication or story. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that you'd like to relay?
There have been many such incidences. Of course, Bel Canto is an interesting watch. Well done there, Mike. Congratulations.
Checks in the post, Roger.
Yes, good. Thank you.
Checks in the post.
I think for me, I'm actually really looking forward to this event, our first live event in March. And then I'll get the opportunity to meet many of our trade members. But of the trade members who I have met, I think one of the standout companies is Mr. Jones Watches. Here's this guy. Again, this typifies what I believe is going on in British watchmaking. You've got somebody who's come from outside of the watch industry. He had, I hope I've got this right, he's an art degree, art background, and a special interest in printing, which he's now, used to a great advantage, and he's created this remarkable business where they print their dials for their watches. I think last time I spoke to Crispin, I think he had 19 employees. I follow him on Instagram, and he's opened another store in London, and he's created a huge success and interest and sales from all over the world. And I think that's, one of the sort of standout companies for me. But also, I'm off to Dubai next week for a Dubai Watch Week, and I'll be meeting Richard from Studio Underdog. And again, I know we mentioned him before, but again, somebody who's come outside of the watch industry and is really taking watchmaking by storm. And he's got some really brilliant ideas in terms of design, and the whole story is different. To me, I think what's coming across from all of these different trade members is they are all different. They all have a unique story. They all have a unique reason for getting into watchmaking. And that is to the British watchmaking scene's benefit. This real diversity of companies which are coming to the stage. And that, for me, is the most exciting part.
That is incredibly valuable to hear, because our listeners will, I think, be very impressed that you picked two brands, and they're very different brands in themselves, of course. Like, as you say with Mr. Jones, it's very much artistically led, and the watch is used as a canvas for artistic expression before almost it's used as a watch. It's amazing how he's managed to integrate the displays to be so dynamic. And
yes,
I love the lazy afternoon. What's it called? Perfectly Useless Afternoon. That's the one.
Yes.
It's a classic. It's a funny thing to say for a watch that retails at €245. I'm sorry, I'm in Germany, so forgive my bias there, but it's just it's a lot of fun for not much money at all. But it's well branded, top to bottom. He's got other merchandise that perfectly aligns with his vision and his concept. And then you've got Rich, who has disrupted the industry without being one of those brands that claims they're a disruptor. He didn't come in to do it that way. And in many ways, he admits this now all the time, that his ignorance was his strength. He just kind of said, well, what would I do if I was going to design a watch? Oh, I'm going to design it this way. Finally, I've got free reign to do my own thing. Because, of course, he designed watches for other companies before. But launching that, capturing people's imagination, giving them something to smile about for an incredible price with a mechanical movement was a superb move. And, the funny thing is, his follow-up piece that everybody was anticipating for quite some time now has recently dropped, and he communicated directly, as he does, that he had 2,428 pre-orders. And this obviously caught fire in the network, and we were talking about it like, wow, he's absolutely smashed it. He's written the perfect second album. But the question was, what's the difference now? Because I was sort of worried. I thought, oh, can he do it? Can he step away from that and do, let's face it, a couple of those watches, the black and the white particularly, are very conservative in comparison to the watermelon piece that is his icon already. But all the feedback I've heard from everybody that's seen the working prototypes in hand is how extremely notable the quality is at the sub €1,000 bracket. And the design is clever. It has these little quirks that mark it as original and the kind of thing that is simultaneously timeless, but also stimulating to look at. So a couple of good choices. And you did also mention, and we'll make a podcast host out of you yet, the event that's coming up in March. That's going to be an excellent segue after Mike's given us a couple of brands that he has similar soft spots for within the Alliance.
Well, I mean, I would definitely have gone for the two that Roger mentions as well. Really brilliant examples of what's possible. In addition, I'm impressed with people like Fears and what Nicholas has done there to sort of relaunch and bring back to life a brand from the past in Bristol with Fears, and move from early days doing quartz watches through to very, very high quality sort of mechanical watches now. I think Fair are doing a really great job in terms of bringing that freshness of color palette to watches. And I do actually think independent brands generally, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, Rob, but independent brands generally are bringing a different viewpoint to what's possible and what can be done with watch design. And I think the Brits within that are also demonstrating some leadership. As you rightly say, Richard has at Studio Underdog has shown real sort of excellence of design leadership in terms of what he's done, not just color but design leadership, and I know that's his background. I think Fair have done something similar. There are some lovely stories like Siderius in Ireland. Just a lovely narrative of how something completely outside of watches led to a watch brand being launched. So wherever you look, there are, as Roger says, there are stories and different reasons why and different narratives that have led people to create watches, and many not originally from the watch industry, but there is, as we know, something about this industry. I mean, I'm not originally from the watch industry, as you know, but there's something about this industry that when you invest time in it, if you'll forgive the pun, it draws you in. It really draws you in. And the fact that there is so much innovation occurring within this island, I think, is to the credit of the brands in the UK, and even people like I think Roger mentioned Neil Duckworth, who was his first employer. I think Neil dines out on that quite regularly these days, but
It was all I could hear coming from his stand during just Roger Smith. I was like, is Roger here? And I was like, no, it's just Neil.
But he's exactly. But what a great story that is. Having spent his entire life to some extent on the other side of the fence, then quite late in life deciding to create his own brand. I mean, to me, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So there is space. Another word that Roger's used. There's space for everybody, and William Wood. Johnny Garrett. What a great job he's doing, and I can only see that brand growing extensively in the future. So, and I think one of the things that we've been successful in doing is showing people that these don't have to be just sort of small lifestyle businesses, that there is an opportunity to really make headway. And if the Alliance is trying to do anything, it's trying to shine a light on these great British brands and give them a sense of belief that they can go on and become much, much bigger brands. And we have something called Project 1 Billion, which is, within the decade to have the sector in the UK being worth £1 billion sterling. And, at the moment it's probably worth, 2/10 of that, but it's very fast growing. And, when you're at that level, then other things can happen around it. Back to this cluster thing, when and it will happen when this sector in the UK is worth $1 billion, then that will encourage people to set up manufacturing opportunities that the sector can draw upon. So but the first task is really to promote what's going on here and shine a light on such an exciting sector.
Have you considered just asking Roger to triple his output? Because that would really help.
Oh dear. What do you think, Roger?
Only.
Yes. Well, yes. Hardly a contribution to British watchmaking, but
yeah. I mean, the thing is, Roger, how lucky are we? And he'll get embarrassed about this. I'm sorry, Roger, but
yes, I'm getting embarrassed already
because a more humble man you won't ever meet. And yet, look at what he does. But we are so lucky as the sector in the UK to have Roger as the sort of the leader. He's the chairman of the Alliance, and he's a leader of it, and to have somebody of that credibility, that genius, if you like, that importance in the watch industry as our totem, I think has done more than anything to bring people together. And so we owe a great deal of debt to him for that.
You see, this is why we don't put the camera on Roger, so we can't see you.
He'll be. I know. He'll be embarrassed, and he'll sort of bat it away. But it just happens to be. It just happens to be true, Roger.
Well, okay, Mike, whatever. But
but actually, I'm awesome. So
actually, I think one of the good things, I mean, I've learned a hell of a lot in these past 3 years with the Alliance, and I remember when I was sort of really in the thick of it, trying to build my business, and I sort of felt that every other watchmaker in Britain should be doing exactly what I'm doing. And the Alliance has been one of the biggest wake-up calls for me, because I kind of now realise, you can't build an industry out of people like me. I mean, we make 18 watches a year. If you have 10 people, 100 people doing what I'm doing, there's still going to be very few watches, and that is not going to contribute to a great future in British watchmaking. So, we need, the industry is what it is today. We are a nation that is reliant upon other watchmaking nations to create our watches. That's the reality. This is why we're doing what we're doing now with the Alliance, to try and promote that, and we've got to be proud of that. And what us Brits are very good at is design and creativity, and we are still able to create some very, very unique and fascinating watches in the current situation, and I think that's to be applauded, really.
Absolutely. And I think that the key thing is the thing perhaps that differentiates British watchmaking, and especially the alliance with you both at its head, is the fact that it's so credible. You're leading by example. It isn't, you're not trying to hide from anything. You're approaching everything head on, every challenge, and pulling all these brands together to give other people a chance to see exactly what the British can do when they put their heads together. And Ireland, of course, Britain and Ireland, because Siderius is in the clique also. Now, talking of this clique and this incredible assembly of brands that you have, the event. This is the last point. We're just going to talk about it in March. We're going to get everybody that listens to the show to come along. Hopefully, it's on March the 9th. Am I correct? Is that right?
Saturday, March the 9th, yep.
So, Mike, tell us where it is and what we can expect when we come along.
It's at a magnificent venue called Linley Hall, which is in Westminster. And it's a beautiful, beautiful hall with a vaulted glass ceiling. And one of the key reasons we went for that hall is we wanted a venue that spoke of the quality of what British watchmaking is all about, and also was a venue that the exhibitors would really welcome in terms of being able to present their wares to the best possible advantage. Often what shows are in sort of not dingy but low ceilinged hotels with not the perfect lighting, and this is the antithesis of that. It's a fantastic sort of venue. We're very pleased that we've got it. It's British Watchmakers Day, and I suppose one of the really exciting elements of it, which was brought to us an idea that Alistair Audsley, the chief executive of the Alliance, came up with, based around Independent Record Shop Day in the UK, which has become a huge thing where British bands particularly, produce albums that are just going to be sold in independent record stores on one single day, and you can see queues going for half a mile around the blocks in these sort of independent record shops, which I'm pleased to say, as a vinyl man, are increasingly coming back, which is great news. What we've encouraged people to do, the brands to do, is to think about creating limited edition watches just to be sold at the event. I'm pleased to say, I'm not entirely sure, Roger, what the latest number is, but we're into double figures of watch brands who are going to do that.
I heard 22.
How many, Roger?
22, I thought.
Wow, God, that's incredible. So there are going to be 22. I think we've got 83 brands in the 87 now in the Alliance. More than close to 50 will be showing at the show. So 50 British brands at the show. And as Roger's just said, 22 of those will be presenting limited editions they've created just for the show, including Roger is doing a Series 1, Roger, aren't you?
That's right, yeah.
Which is, Alistair described it to me as this would be the watch that the Series 1 watch that you would design for yourself, which I thought was a lovely way of doing it, of describing it. But we'll be producing 10 special bel cantos, and I know people like Fears, Studio Underdog, I think, William Wood, etc., are creating special edition watches, limited edition watches, and I just think the excitement around that is going to be extraordinary. So much so that we've recently had discussions about how we meter them out during the course of the day, so that you don't the first X hundred people don't snaffle them all up. I think the demand and the interest is going to be extraordinary.
It could be bedlam, I guess, because even if you drip feed them throughout the day, if there's unless it's totally random, which would probably cause a stampede whenever a new one was released,
exactly.
A queue at every booth. If there's like one released every hour or two, or depending on how many they produce, I can't wait to find out what you decide upon, because I can't really wrap my head around that issue myself. But how do people get tickets if they want to come?
the first thing to do is, if you're not already a member of the Alliance, then join, because you'll get your preferential treatment, you'll get access to tickets earlier, etc. For not much more than a subscription to an annual subscription to a magazine, and by the way, you get a free annual subscription to a magazine as part of the deal. So why wouldn't you join up? People can join the Alliance and get access to tickets for the show, and then once they have been provided, they'll go on open sale. But we're hoping that many people will take advantage of this great opportunity and join the Alliance, because as well as trade members, we were open to club members, and we have many hundreds now across the world. I think, Roger, we've got like 40% of the membership are in the United States, I think. Is that right?
I think so. Something like that, yes.
So, it genuinely is of interest across the world. It's an amazing, there's a whole host of benefits for joining as a club member, including, access to limited edition watches generally. We launched the Alliance 01 limited edition, which was a collaboration between Fears and ourselves earlier this year. We produced 50 watches using, which was a Fears watch designed by our designers and Nicholas, but using our jumping hour movement. And we produced 50 of them. They sold out within 3 minutes, and all of the proceeds, all of the profits from that went to the Alliance, which is a non-for-profit organisation. So, and any benefits we get from the British Watchmakers Day will also go to supporting the work of the Alliance. So it's a great thing to be involved in. I think it's going to be an amazing day, and will set, I hope, a new benchmark for the way in which these sorts of events can be run. And indeed, it's ironic, Roger, really, isn't it? That this may be hubristic as well. By the way, this may, if it's a disaster, then I'll be blamed for having said this. But it's almost ironic to me that when Roger and I met, I think it was in 2018, Roger, at the last Salon QP, and we were so, I think, disenchanted with what was that particular show, weren't we? It just felt like it was the end of an era, and yet we were aware, as Roger said earlier, that there was so much positivity to be expressed about what was going on in our industry, in our country. And that's what gave vent to the Alliance, and the British Watchmakers Day, I think, is hopefully going to be the sort of antithesis of that show in 2018, and demonstrate how far the industry has come in that time.
Well, if you want to join, you need to go to www.britishwatchmakers.com. You can sign up by clicking the little link in the top right-hand corner. And I think after that little expose, you're probably going to get quite a few new members, because I'm going to sign up. Not already.
Good man.
Sorry.
Good man.
Yeah.
and a shout out to all watchmakers across the world. Actually, they get people, students, student watchmakers. That is, they get free membership. So anybody who is learning their watchmaking trade at the moment can join free of charge completely.
Well, we have a few of those in the network, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear that. Guys, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating chat, and I really enjoyed getting your insights to the Alliance and its goals. If any of our listeners have any questions for Roger or Mike, then please do get in touch. You can do so via contacting us on Instagram at therealtime.show, or via our personal accounts, either Rob Nuds or Alon Ben Joseph, ROBNUDDS ALONBENJOSEPH, via email, either Rob or Alon at therealtime.show, or via the contact form on the website, www.therealtime.show. We'll be back soon with more top quality watch content. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.